Hi, this is Debbie. Watercolouring videos are my most requested, so today we're going to look at some simple watercoloured layers. I'm going to be using this birthday bit stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. It's got these great outline images of balloons which have a nice big area for watercolouring, and it's got a lovely script sentiment as well. I've already prepared a white heat embossed design on some Arches cold press watercolour card, and we're going to be using the emboss resist technique with our watercolour layers. I placed the cardstock in the Misti stamping tool, and then I treated it with EK Success powder tool to stop embossing powder sticking where you didn't want it to. And then I stamped the images with Smart ink, and then white heat embossed them with some Simon Says Stamp white embossing powder. And then going to tape the card onto some board, and this will prevent the card from warping when we bring in water. Now that we're all prepared, I've got a big jug of water off to one side, and I've got my paintbrushes along with my palette. I'm using a palette which holds lots of these little half pans, and I've squirted my favourite watercolours into these half pans, let them dry, and then they're there ready for whenever I want to use them. I've test swatched the colours I'm going to use for this card, and I'm using Daniel Smith Quinacridone Coral, Schmincke Lemon Yellow, Schmincke May Green, and De La Rowney Phthalo Turquoise. And I'm going to start now by applying a wash of water to the first balloon, and then using the wet on wet technique to bring in some colour. And let the water do the work, let the water move that colour around. And then I'm going to bring in some deeper colour and then leave that again to move into the water. My aim at this point is to get a light layer of colour down on all of the balloons, and then I'm going to dry those layers and then bring in more colour and dry the layers and bring in more colour until eventually I get the depth and shading that I want. I'll do this for each of the balloons and also for the background, and I'll concentrate on getting a lot of colour around the birthday wishes sentiment so that that stands out from the background, nice deep colour so that the white pops off the colour. I'm going to play some music now, and I'm going to carry on watercolouring, and I will be back soon. As we come to the end of the watercolouring, I want to add some splatter to this image. However, I don't want any of that to end up on the balloons. So I've tried in the past to protect my images with my hands and such like, and it's not always successful. So I've stamped the images onto some post-it note and trimmed those out, and then roughly covered the images before going in with the paint. I got asked the other day about getting the right look to splattering, and it's obviously a very random process. However, if you use a large brush, you'll get large splatters, and if you switch to a smaller brush, you're going to get smaller splatters. So that's something to keep in mind. I also like to splatter with a solution of perfect pearls. However, if you don't have perfect pearls, you can mix up a nice thick consistency of a white or a silver paint and use that instead. I'm now going to tidy up around the birthday wishes sentiment. I wanted there to be splatter around that area, but you don't want any splatters actually on the lettering itself, otherwise you might not be able to read the lettering so clearly. So I've got a damp paintbrush, and then I'm just rubbing that around the heat embossing and just removing any splatters from the lettering. Once the panel is totally dry, you can then peel back the painter's tape at a sharp angle, and that will prevent any tearing. I think a simple watercolour card such as this benefits from having a die cut and stitched edge to it. So I'm using the Simon Stamp stitch rectangles. I've attached one of those with washi tape and then ran it through the die cutting machine. One of my favourite colours for a card base is the fog cardstock from Simon Stamp. It's a nice light neutral, doesn't interfere with the colours of the card, and yet it grounds a card sometimes I think better than a white card base might. Having cut and scored an A2 card base, I'm then going to add a generous amount of foam adhesive to the back of the watercolour piece. Watercolour pieces, they do tend to be a little bit lumpy bumpy, they've had lots of water added to them and aren't necessarily totally flat. And I think adding lots of foam adhesive, it helps to keep the panel flat on the finished card. To accent the balloons, I chose some of my favourite sequins from Lucy Abrams and Pretty Pink Posh, and then attached those with some Ranger Multi-Medium and Matte. This means that if any glue does squidge out, the glue dries matte and you won't be able to see it. And that completes this simple card with light watercolour layers. I'll leave links below in the video description to the products that I've used today, along with a link to a blog post that goes along with this video. I'll leave you with some photographs, and I want to thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider clicking subscribe. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.